Rewind-A-Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly as we hear from John and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads. And if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show. And if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
It is Rewind-A-Dynamite. John Pollock and Wai Ting here with you on a Wednesday night following tonight's AEW debut in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Very cold Winnipeg, Manitoba.
As always, I mean, you know, it's basically the Arctic up here. So, you know, I mean, these wrestling shows, these promotions really picking optimal times to do shows in Canada, I would say.
Well, they're going to be there in Calgary in the dead of summer, so that should be a lot of fun. It'll be scorching here in Toronto at the end of June, and it's frigid in WWE in Montreal, and then AEW in Winnipeg in March.
Realistically, they're like 3 days out of the year that are optimal, you know, for really nice weather in Canada to do shows in. So no matter what, you're hitting tough weather.
Yeah, it's you know what? Go to like PEI. PEI is a wonderful place.
I hear Vancouver's pretty good too.
Vancouver's very nice as well.
Yeah.
A lot of places you can go in our lovely country. Happy birthday, Wai.
Hey, thank you so much. Thanks, John.
Are we having a bar mitzvah for you tonight?
I had one. It was great. You know, lasted about 20 minutes. Right at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All your past opponents came out as the ghost of Christmas future for you.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if this is like, was this I'd love to know, everybody. Was this was what we saw tonight a good representation of what a bar mitzvah is like?
We are going to get, I don't want to promise and then we don't get it, but I have enlisted John Pine, who is going to give us a breakdown of the authenticity of tonight's
wow,
bar mitzvah. Okay.
Lovely.
Because he was going to be watching with a very critical eye because I cannot give a proper breakdown.
You've never been to a bar mitzvah?
I've never been to a bar mitzvah. No.
Okay. Well, great. When is this? Like, it's happening later on the show?
I'm hoping he will email in before the end of the show, and if not, I will keep everyone posted. So He said he would do it. He said he would send this in. So
lovely.
When I got an email from him earlier today and the first word was shalom, I felt that it was only appropriate that we put him to work afterwards. He said he had extremely high hopes for the segment, and him and his friend, also Jewish, have been going back and forth all day talking about this. And let's see if it lived up to expectations. We'll find out.
I'm looking forward to hearing that report. I mean, you know, John Pine does great GCW reports as usual, but this might be the most important report he's ever given.
Well, AEW had an important report to hand out on Wednesday. They announced a 6-city tour of Canada for later this year. Of course, they made their debut in the country last October for their 2 nights in Toronto, Winnipeg tonight, and they are going to come back with Forbidden Door on Sunday, June the 25th at Scotiabank Arena. So a step up from the Coca-Cola Coliseum where they were here last. And they will follow that with the following Wednesday's Dynamite and Rampage taping at the First Ontario Centre in Hamilton. The following week, Dynamite and Rampage will emanate from Rogers Place in Edmonton, Alberta. The next week, they will break up Dynamite and Rampage with Dynamite in Saskatoon, and Rampage is coming to Regina, Saskatchewan.
Whoa. Hey, man, how many TV shows does Regina get? Okay. This might be the biggest show that's ever hit Regina in quite some time.
I mean, clearly Brock Lesnar has brought the pro wrestling, it's just brought the focus of professional wrestling to this fine province of Saskatchewan. And then the day after Regina, they are going to do a House Rules house show at the Saddle Dome in Calgary, Alberta. So I don't know what they have planned, but this is... you can see the logo there. I imagine that this is as the Calgary Stampede is going on, which to piggyback off the Calgary Stampede is a very smart idea. That is what WWF did for the famous Canadian Stampede pay-per-view, was, you know, with all of that coming up in the city. So the Saddle Dome is a very big venue for AEW to run for a house show. And maybe this is the time you call up Bruce Hart.
I mean, that a real different.
Bruce Hart versus Jon Moxley. I would consider flying out to Calgary.
I think they should put it on pay-per-view. Honestly, yeah. Hey, man, this is great. It's great news, you know, as Canadians, to see that they're especially hitting some of these other areas that don't often get any shows, you know, much less an AEW show. There are a lot of starved AEW fans, I'm sure, in all of these places. And Toronto is finally getting an AEW pay-per-view. What do you think about the timing of it? And, you know, how do you think it'll do, given that it's not the first AEW show here? Do you think that will have any effect?
It's a bigger event than what they came back for. It's not the first event in the market. It's a Sunday night as opposed to a Saturday. That I don't know if that's going to play any role, but I think given the fact that it's a pay-per-view and it's going to be a bigger show, and you have the injection of New Japan talent, I think this is an event that you could get people traveling for, especially from Buffalo and from surrounding areas. Montreal is not getting a show in these 6 tours. So it could very well be like, if you're someone in Montreal and you want to see an AEW pay-per-view and maybe stick around for Dynamite in Hamilton, that's probably strategic on their part not to run Montreal and Toronto and just funnel everyone to the pay-per-view. My long answer to your question, I feel they will do very well. I'm not going to... A year ago, I might have said automatic sellout, even if this was the second time in the market. I still feel pretty optimistic for the Toronto market, but we saw Revolution did not sell out in San Francisco. First time there. That was a pay-per-view. But I do feel they will do pretty well. Like for wrestling at the Scotiabank Arena, like WWE could put in, I want to say, around 12,000 was a sellout or so, given whatever the setup is for a pay-per-view. So that's what you're looking at, and that's an achievable figure for this. I definitely feel that they would be undercutting themselves to go back to the Coca-Cola Coliseum. This would be this is a risk worth taking. I don't know if I'm as bullish on a Rogers Center as I would have been for a year ago. When you're talking about Punk, you're talking about the first time in the market. It's a different time for AEW. So I like this choice.
I like it too. Yeah. Honestly, like in hindsight, I maybe a good idea that they didn't run or even attempt to run a stadium, you know, just kind of given the lack of a CM Punk and just maybe the way things have kind of turned out for AEW thus far. But I think this is a big enough sounding show that it'll get everybody who might have been on the fence even to go to the earlier editions of Dynamite or Rampage to decide to go to this one. It's not often Toronto gets a pay-per-view level show. Last year, Forbidden Door was arguably the best show that they've had the entire year. And there's going to be presumably a lot of star power under that roof. You're talking about a city that hosted Global Wars for Ring of Honor for years, and that always felt like a major attraction. Now it's not just the New Japan stars, but you also have your AEW big names as well. And I think if maybe some of the teases are any indication, like this year's card could be really, really tremendous for Forbidden Door. So especially if this show had any issue maybe selling out, I feel like a card that might potentially include an Ospreay versus Kenny, Zack Sabre Jr. versus Bryan Danielson, I feel like it's a pretty safe bet that it'll fill the house.
Yeah, there's also that same day there is a home game for the Blue Jays at Rogers Center as well. So I don't think that would have necessarily gone into the thinking. I think you want to scale this at an arena setting, but nonetheless, that is the case that weekend. So tickets will be going on sale later this month. I think all but the Calgary shows go on sale May 24th, and then the Calgary show is actually March 17th rather. That tickets go on sale for that. So the pay-per-view will certainly be the one to watch of how fast tickets get scooped up, because what I've always said about Toronto is that you can draw from many different markets as well, that people coming up from Buffalo, from Montreal, from surrounding areas of Toronto and around the province as well. So there should be a pretty healthy appetite for tickets there. John Cena, we are going to talk about next. He was interviewed by the Associated Press, and I definitely saw a lot of backlash towards some of his comments, because he was asked about the sexual misconduct allegations against Vince McMahon, and if it was hard for him to reconcile the feelings that he has for Vince McMahon regarding the allegations attached to him. And John Cena said, no, he does not. And he says, I mean, everyone has the right to have their perspective. I have the right to have mine. When you love somebody, you take them as imperfectly perfect as they are. We all make mistakes. We all have poor decisions. Lord knows I've made my collection of poor choices. That doesn't mean I'm not going to love somebody. There's no way I can go on record and say I don't love Vince McMahon. So if you were just to hear that paragraph in its in a vacuum without the context, you would be thinking, God, what did this guy do? I mean, did he no-show an important meeting that John Cena was going to be a part of? Did he prevent John Cena from taking a really important movie role? To me, it was very much... to me, it was a guy that obviously has an incredible amount of reverence for Vince McMahon, while at the same time, to me, greatly underselling the severity of these allegations. And I'm not saying that, listen, you're a great admirer of this person, that you have to trash them in the media. I don't think you have to trash someone to say that it is to be a lot more stern when asked about this. And John Cena is a very savvy individual that has to be knowing these questions are coming, especially when you're talking to an outlet like the Associated Press, and that this topic might come up about Vince McMahon. And I think having a better answer than we all make mistakes.
Yeah. I think I understand it's a tough position maybe for somebody like in his position to talk about something like this. But you would figure that like he would be maybe a bit more prepared for an answer, and maybe this was his prepared answer, and maybe he felt like this was, what accurately represented his feelings, and I'm sure it does. But I think the unfortunate part of it is that it's an answer that seems to really minimize these allegations that are a lot more, than simply mistakes. I don't
sexual misconduct, hush money payments, accused of coercing a woman into oral sex. Like, this is say nothing of the settlement of the decades old Rita Chatterton case. I mean, that is something that I look at more and more, is how some of these stories, and it's like how we couch the language of how these are talked about. It's they're not. It's like you take away the exact description of what is being accused, and we just package them as mistakes, or just we make them seem a lot more digestible when they are just when you take away the what we're actually talking about here. And I think for a lot of people, you hear this enough and you turn this into a story that you contort in your mind as, well, he just had a relationship with a woman he worked with. What's the big deal? Or this is a money story. This is just about money. And it's like you couch it how you want to view this figure. And if you're somebody that wants to hold Vince McMahon in some high regard, you're going to be a lot more easy on what it is we're talking about here, instead of just laying out the exact allegations, and that they should not be just swept aside and just being addressed as poor decisions.
Right. Yeah. I do feel the need to specify that they are allegations. The Rita Chatterton case has been, I guess, dealt with, through a settlement, but Vince does continue to allege that those allegations are false. So I think it's important to state that, and maybe it's important to kind of view that through the lens of John Cena as well, who seems to speak of this person as a family member. Now, his answer does indicate that there were faults and mistakes made. Now, what exactly does he believe factually are the mistakes that Vince McMahon made? Entering into like hush money agreements with employees that he's had these sort of relations with? Is it simply having the relations themselves? And if you maybe view it through that sort of understanding, is what John Cena said enough? I guess is it a big enough response? Maybe just to kind of encompassing maybe all that. Not. I don't think so. Like even then, I still feel like it's somebody like a John Cena in the public eye probably ought to take a bigger stand, against like something that is pretty like frowned upon, I suppose, in the workplace. And again, it's very hard to maybe
or maybe not comment on it. Like, listen, I'm not out here to persecute John Cena. He's not the person that is the center of this story. And I mean, I look at it and I would ask you, Wade, that like if you had someone that you were extremely close with that was accused of something awful,
like you,
okay, like
yeah.
I would honestly hope that I would have a friendship with you that you would be honest with me and could be very disappointed in a decision I made. If I made a horrible error, I would not want to rely on friends that are just telling me what I want to hear and divorcing me from reality. Now, I might not want to hear you say that in the press, but I would think that you would maybe be in a position where you would have to.
Yeah, and so I don't necessarily know if like a no comment would be better for Cena, because look at how much like people like you and I are dissecting, like this paragraph of words, and that's just unfortunately the nature of celebrity, the nature of media. But
and this is also somebody that, I mean, he really stepped in it last year with the whole Taiwan controversy. And this is somebody that is, I would say, more than 99% of the pro wrestling population is as adept at media as anybody else, that has that is most likely to get a spotlight based on how he handles a situation like this, that frankly, 99% of wrestlers are not going to be held to like a great account if they give some awful answer. Yeah. John Cena is one of those that is going to have a lot more attention. And if this were happening in another industry with a major figure, I think this would be a bigger story of somebody just, and John Cena is not the only one of many others that have just excused this because of who the person is. And that if this were some middle rung independent promoter that was accused of this person would be exiled from the industry and would be completely excoriated by his peers and colleagues. But power and friendships are going to trump a lot of that, but most of all, power is going to.
Yeah. So let's get back to the example. If like, you were being accused of something in the public eye and I was being asked to comment on it. I would if I would probably feel the need to comment on it, and I would hope that you'd be okay if I spoke my truth. And I think my truth would maybe sound like,
if you agreed to an interview, okay?
Yeah.
And there was something awful that had happened with me. You would go into that interview with the knowledge, there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to be asked about this. Sure. How am I going to address this? And likewise, like I would know that this question is probably coming my way. I should probably know what I'm going to say.
As I'm sure Cena might have been prepared for, right? And so like, what would my answer be? I would hope that in that time I would have had a chance to speak to you personally about like, let's say like, some of these allegations that might be as severe as what like, Vince McMahon has been alleged to do. And then at that point, it would kind of be up to me to believe you or not. And then my response would be, something according to that. If I didn't, like, if say you had an excuse and I didn't believe you, I would feel the need to like say it like publicly. Now, if I did believe you and if I believed like, okay, like John, you made a mistake. I it's not hard for me to reconcile my feelings towards you. You and I like are still incredibly good friends. I feel like I would probably say the same thing, as Cena. Now we of course don't know like, what sort of conversation Cena and Vince have, but like I feel like we can maybe assume that Cena has an understanding of sorts of like what Vince went through. I guess it's just hard for me to see that from the outside, what that understanding would be, considering these allegations.
Yeah. I also look at it from the fact that I think that and believe me, I'm not saying that nobody cares, but I also feel like our reaction to this is that, oh boy, this could really come back and hurt John Cena. And in reality, I think there are far more people that have just moved on from this, that are not looking at this with anywhere near the insight that, a handful of people really are, truly.
Yeah. And does he just?
There was not this crazy outrage that Vince McMahon was spotted at a WWE event. This person who has been accused of all of this, like that was not the controversy. The controversy was, is this guy booking Raw? Like that is the easy topic that people can devour and talk about for hours. But when you get into the allegations and such, that's where people just, I don't think they want to necessarily dive into that aspect of things.
Sure. And I feel like I kind of credit Cena for actually giving us an answer and not just maybe stepping away from it. I also don't know if he should be, if he should lose his anything really. Like
I'm not saying he should lose anything. I'm more so saying that I do find it disappointing that continually we seem to get this reaction as though it's just this minor infraction. I mean, to be accused of such things, and the fact that we have there was a police report after the Tanzabar incident. Like this is not just as though there has not been a pattern of certain actions. Like this is somebody that has been accused of some horrendous things, and to me that is a major issue with this individual that I hope that despite this complete privacy that he has opted to have, no addressing of any of these allegations, I hope it is someone that has looked back and has some regret over this, that has learned something from this. Because on the outside looking in, the lesson has been, if this happens, you have to go about and conduct the right paperwork. That has been the lesson that his company has displayed, and one that even taking not properly reporting what should have been company funds, you still are back into your same position of power. So even that was not some drastic penalty that he underwent. Yeah.
Well, I mean, sort of, I guess, I don't know, losing his role, in his company, like how will we know that he's, felt any sort of repercussion as a result of this? Like, I think it's in his interest, and it's in the company's interest to just kind of let this entire thing wash away. So I wouldn't expect any sort of comment publicly, about how much he might have changed, if at all, unless there was some other purpose. Maybe this documentary, that Bill Simmons is putting together, might tackle the issue, and maybe we'll finally get Vince to speak on it a little bit, but I'm even somewhat doubtful of that, just maybe I'm not understanding like that it probably serves them really no benefit to just kind of bring the news up. But anyway, kind of getting back to this, like I certainly don't expect, this to be solved through a John Cena response. Some part of me kind of wonders if we're looking too deep into this, like to try to pull too much out of it to be able to, say how much can we really kind of conclude? Maybe what we can say that is like, the way Cena seemed to couch this as like a guy making mistakes. It on the surface, just reading that quote definitely seems to minimize, what the allegations are. So I would love, for maybe somebody, if they have an opportunity to continue to ask him about something like this, but seeing the response that even an answer like that, seemed to create, he probably won't want to talk about it that much more.
Yeah. And it was just interesting that it was a very similar response that we heard from Bryan Danielson last year when he was asked by Nick Hausman about this at the StarCast event. And he said that in general, when it comes to Vince, is maybe it's more about love. If you love somebody, it's that people make mistakes and you love them regardless. And both of them invoking love that they have for Vince McMahon. And I would be very curious if Vince McMahon truly has that friend or friends of his. Like, think about what his life has been that we have known. It's all tied up in work, where he has people working underneath him. And to have that network of people that would be those to talk to a Vince McMahon and actually have friends that would be able to speak with him about why this is wrong. Like, this is the psychoanalysis of Vince McMahon that I would love to know.
So a few things that are interesting about it is that the fact that like when Danielson said that, I didn't see this turn into as big of a headline as when John Cena said it. And
there was a little bit of that. There was some response to it, but you're right. And
I didn't
to be
see
quite
as much
honest,
negativity. And to me, there's a big difference because Bryan Danielson is one of the most beloved, and I think like genuinely like good people that we can tell, at least, from the public's perspective in this industry. And when he says something like that, somehow like we seem to accept it. At least, I'm speaking maybe just of sort of the zeitgeist.
Cena's pretty beloved by this point, I would say.
I don't know, not to the level of a Bryan Danielson, at least, but
he's pretty widely respected at this point, I would say.
I mean, the Taiwan thing, I think seems to, offer a different opinion.
That was a bigger non-wrestling story, I would say. The Taiwan thing, like that did not get that too much attention within wrestling when it happened.
Right. But like both Cena and Bryan have suggested that this is a mistake. I think the big question for me is, does Vince McMahon actually view these as mistakes? Or are they mistakes simply on the surface? Or are they mistakes simply from a financial, professional perspective? Like, my career was ruined. I was ousted from the board as a result of this. Don't get caught. Like, was it that type of thing? Or does he truly regret his actions? We don't know, and I don't know if we will, because I don't know if I'll ever hear Vince talk about it.
No, that's probably not something that he is going to address. At least he hasn't, and he has had, what is it, like 8-9 months to do so. So anyway, we'll move on. On Wednesday, WWE announced on the bump through Ric Flair that the Great Muta, who they did constantly refer to him as the Great Muta with the graphic of the Great Muta. So it does look like he's being inducted in the gimmick, you would think, for the Hall of Fame at the end of the month.
I imagine, I don't anticipate him showing up in the mask or face paint. Like, I think he'll show up like out of character, but he is more well known to a North American audience as the Great Muta than KG Muta. I
guess so. Yeah. So
it's like I guess how Kevin Nash is more well known as Diesel than Kevin Nash.
That's I guess so. Yes. So he's going in. I don't think Ric Flair explicitly stated in the segment that he is inducting him, but I guess that's what people are assuming. And, he did note the fact that Reed had just completed a tour of All Japan, and it even teamed with Muto on that tour. And the tour ended about a week or so before Reed's death in March of 2013. So there's not just the history of Flair and Muto as performers, but that connection as well, where Flair had flown over there as well for that All Japan tour at the beginning as well. So we have Great Muta and we have Rey Mysterio thus far. Stacy Keibler is expected, and I guess we'll see if there's a fourth, or do they go with the three? But that's kind of what we're looking for the Hall of Fame class.
We'll see exactly how small this class might be.
It's like WCW 2000 with Muto, Stacy Keibler, and Rey Mysterio. Remember Muto was there with Vampiro during the summer?
So who else from that time might be going in, you think?
Bill Banks, maybe. Ed Ferrara.
Bill Banks. Okay. Wow, okay. That's quite the pickup there.
Okay. The Bellas have departed WWE. Their deals were up, and they are opting to leave the company, and they are now marketing themselves under their names of Brie and Nicole Garcia. So they are not going to be known as the Bellas any longer. And Nikki did a Instagram live video on Wednesday and stated pretty clearly, we are not going to AEW. And said that we were at the pay-per-view in San Francisco so that her son, Mateo, could see her uncle, Bryan Danielson, wrestle, which would be very late and very long. There's no way my kid
and very violent.
Very violent too, but I look at it, the length to me would have been like, there's no way my kids would watch a 65-minute. I don't think they'd last watching a 5-minute match.
Yeah, I don't know if an Iron Man match is, I mean, that's like an entire wake window almost.
Like maybe like cut it down and put in like a TikTok video. It's like, here are the highlights. And he loses at the end where MJF is talking to Birdie and Buddy into the camera. I wonder if they were watching.
Maybe you just show them the first fall and that's about as much as you can, get away with. But yeah, I mean, it seems like every talent with any sort of career outside of their WWE, I guess, run is bound to go through this, even if you're Dwayne Johnson, eventually you'll have to lose your name. And I'm sure this was difficult for them, but at this point, I feel like they'll be more than fine. They have enough ventures outside of the WWE that I don't know what they were necessarily gaining from it other than the ability to keep that name. At this point, I think they're both established enough, just as Nikki and Brie, that they probably don't need it.
Then we have Will Ospreay. He's out of the New Japan Cup due to a shoulder injury that was sustained this past Monday in the match with Mark Davis. So originally he was just going to miss the show on Wednesday, they had announced, and then on Wednesday, they stated that he is in fact out of the tournament and Mark Davis is back in the tournament to take Ospreay's spot. So today's show saw David Finlay beat the Great O'Khan, and Shota Umino went 26 minutes with Zack Sabre Jr. and pinned him after using the Death Rider, and thus pins the TV champion and advances in the tournament. Probably will get a title shot down the road. So our quarterfinal matches see Evil taking on Mark Davis, and LIJ members Tetsuya Naito and Sonata will meet on Friday. Then Saturday, it's Tama Tonga against Hiroki Goto and David Finlay against Shota Umino, with the semifinals on Sunday and the final next Tuesday. So, Wei, who do you feel will be meeting in the finals here?
Okay, well, I mean, I'm going by, your suggestion, and I'm in agreement with your suggestion about David Finlay going all the way to the end. And on the other side, I think a Finlay versus Naito would okay.
That's what I'm thinking as well. Is Naito and Finlay in the final? I think two believable winners. I guess there's that's what I'm leaning towards.
Yeah. And Finlay versus Okada, like that still feels like such a huge step up for me that like maybe a Naito Okada feels even a bit more likely. Do they want to go to that? Can they, like, you tell me, how viable is it for them to go to a Naito versus Okada at this point versus maybe another?
You could certainly do it. Like that's a worthy match to do at a sumo hall. I would say that Finlay is still my pick to win this thing, that I feel like they have clearly put the rocket on him and they're going to just go all the way with him in this tournament. There's still the part of me that looks at Evil, who has just been beaten like a drum. Could they just do some upset with him in this? I certainly see him beating Mark Davis. I don't think they're going to go with Mark Davis beyond this, but you could do Naito and Evil in the final four and then Finlay on the other side with probably with Tama Tonga. You could go with that one. So that's coming up later this week. And next Tuesday, WH and I will be doing a review of the finals of the New Japan Cup up on the cafe. So you can look forward to that on Tuesday. Raw on Monday did 1,705,000 viewers, 0.53 in the demo. So a rare week. They were not number one on cable. They were behind the NBA. They dropped 7% in viewers, but were up 2% in the demo. So like SmackDown, down in overall viewership, but up in the demo. They had a small increase in women in 18 to 49, and 18 to 34 was also up 6%. It was the 50-plus audience that dropped, and that's the reason their overall viewership had a lower average. And peaked in the second hour, and in Canada, they did over 358,000 viewers. It was their second highest number of the year, behind the Raw is 30 special, and this beat every episode of Raw last year in Canada. So SmackDown did a monster number on Friday, and Raw did a monster number on Monday. Like, anytime you're doing over 300,000 viewers, that's a big show in Canada for pro wrestling. So they were well above that figure, and this was above like what they did after WrestleMania last year. So it's very hot at this moment in Canada.
How competitive is Raw with Dynamite in Canada, or vice versa? I guess
it's not competitive at all right now. Dynamite is really stagnated. It's ahead of NXT, but not by a giant margin anymore. Like it is Raw number one. SmackDown is up, but it's still number two. And then it's a pretty big depart. Like Dynamite last week, I think did 76,000 viewers to compare. Raw did 358 this week. So it's a pretty monster gap at the moment. NXT in the US did 590,000 viewers and a 0.15. This is down from the Roadblock special last week, but 76,000 in Canada, which is their highest in 4 weeks as well. And the angle on the show saw Grayson Waller show up at Johnny Gargano's house while Johnny Gargano was in the ring addressing the crowd. So he jumped to the back, got into his car, and for the next hour and 45 minutes of this episode, drove home. He does not live around the corner from the Performance Center. So he gets home, and there is Grayson, who's been outside. Granted, it's Florida. I guess it's not that cold, but he's been outside in the yard for an hour and 45 minutes waiting for Johnny Gargano. And they brawl in his front yard. Candice and Quill is up way past his bedtime. This kid is one.
Kids like to watch wrestling.
Well, he got to see it in person. I don't know which kid got to see more violence in the last week, Mateo or Quill. So they do this brawl where it's Grayson Waller that throws dirt in Gargano's eyes and beats Gargano up and leaves him laying in front of his kid. And Candice and Quill are there looking over Johnny, who is he's Johnny Restless or I said Johnny Resting on the ground. This was quite the intense angle at the end. It was a little wacky. It was a little bit of Triple H, Randy Orton vibes to it, but there was like this idea of like laying out this man right in front of his family. I continue to be very impressed with Grayson Waller. I just think he's got a really great demeanor as a heel on this show. So that was the big angle. And on Roxanne Perez, she was not on the show, and they're now doing a ladder match for the title, which they didn't out and out say it's vacant, but the way it was positioned is that they're going to do a ladder match to determine the new champion. So whether Roxanne Perez ends up returning to be in this ladder match or not, the ladder match has Zoe Stark, Gigi Dolan, and more qualifying matches to come. And then they did a contract signing for Braun Breaker and Carmelo Hayes.
Hard for me to imagine that she won't be on the show. It's WrestleMania weekend. You would imagine a bigger spotlight on NXT than usual. So I imagine they're just setting up for her, return. But I kind of like the fact that they're doing these big angles. It's out of the ordinary, gets them out of the Performance Center and gets people talking. Like last week, the angle with Roxanne did really well online, and I imagine this stuff with Grayson Waller will probably do pretty well online on YouTube as well.
Yeah, the interesting thing with Roxanne is that prior to the match last week, they had started to build up Tiffany Stratton going for the title, and then Lyra Valkyria also issued a challenge, and then none of that was addressed this week. So I seriously, I don't know if there was some existing issue with Roxanne Perez that they have changed plans, or if they're just going this direction. She's going to show up and be in this ladder match.
So how many more spots are vacant in the ladder match?
I think it's 4 total, and they've put in 2.
You could imagine maybe they're setting up, those few.
It's possible. You're right. You're right. They could end up putting in Tiffany and Valkyria in there, and then Roxanne Perez makes her comeback and takes on the other 4. That would make 2 5-ways on this show, because Wesley is also defending his North American title against 4 others. So they are cramming a lot of people onto this show. But nonetheless, that was NXT. And the last bit of news is UFC 286 this weekend. Not the deepest card, but on top, it is the 3rd fight between Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman, who had their rematch last August in Salt Lake City, Utah. A hotbed.
For MMA, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of roots there with the UFC, aren't there?
Were
there a lot of shows in Salt Lake?
No, not really. It was just a random location that they went to. So in the last fight, Kamaru Usman had come into that fight with a 19-fight win streak, and he did lose the first round to Leon Edwards, even got taken down, and came back, won the second round, won the third round, won the fourth round, and Leon's corner, I mean, they are just giving it to him in between rounds. They're like, dude, you're going to blow this. And in the 5th round, they have immortalized this now into the commercial. You have Rogan and Cormier who are basically stating, Leon Edwards, he needs a miracle here. Like, this thing's over. And you have John Anik who says, but that's not the cloth that he is cut from. And dude, within a minute or two, Leon Edwards lands a head kick and knocks Kamaru Usman out cold and wins the welterweight title. It was the knockout of the year last year. So this rematch, it's interesting because Kamaru Usman is still like a minus 230 favorite going into the rematch. And it's one of those rematches where if you're Usman, you were winning this fight and then you got nailed with a head kick. How much do you change from your last fight versus what do you chalk up to just a lapse in judgment and getting caught by Edwards? And for Edwards, this is going to be in London, England at the O2 Arena. So he is going to be a superstar here, much like our main event in Winnipeg tonight. So it's an interesting fight, and whether, a lot of these fights, when you have the rematch, it tends to favor the guy who won the last fight. But Kamaru Usman, he is getting up there. He's now 35 years old. So Edwards is the younger fighter. And yeah, they have each won one against each other. And this will probably be their last fight on Saturday. And then Justin Gaethje is taking on Rafael Fiziev in lightweight action. Gaethje has had 10 fights in the UFC. They have been among the 10 most exciting fights you could ever put together of one fighter. He has fought for the title several times, but has never won one. Fiziev is on the come up here. After his first fight in the UFC, he got nailed with like a legit black mass. Okay. That's what knocked him out. It was an unbelievable knockout. And he came back and he won 6 fights in a row after this loss. But you watch this knockout, it's like, man, Justin Gaethje catches you, this guy could be put to sleep. But Fiziev has won 6 in a row, very impressive fashion. He's beaten Hanato Moicano, Bobby Green, and Brad Riddell in his last 3. So this is a major fight for Fiziev, because if he gets a win here, he will be into the upper echelon at lightweight. But this is still a fight Gaethje can win, and he has gotten a lot more. He doesn't tend to just get into these wild firefights as he used to, but he will still brawl, and he will still have these very exciting fights. And he's also got a wrestling background that he never uses. So there's always that potential that he could change his game up here. But that's a very intriguing number 2 fight. Those are the big fights coming up this weekend. Marvin Vettori is also fighting Roman Dolidze. Important fight at 185 pounds. And Gunnar Nelson is back taking on Brian Barberina, which is on the main card. So this is a 5 p.m. Eastern pay-per-view, so a much earlier show. And that means Eric Marcotte and I will be live about a half hour after the main card. So look out for that Saturday night here on the YouTube channel. If you subscribe, turn on your notifications, and you will be alerted when Eric and I go live. Pretty much as soon as Wai is out the door here, we'll be going live, because I know Wai just wants to catch the main event, and then he'll be off for his Saturday night birthday party plans.
Yeah, you know it, John. Yeah, I mean, my plans will be to watch the post show, isn't it? That's all the celebrating I need.
Wai's been harassing me all week by text, asking me my thoughts on Usman Edwards, and we've been going back and forth. So I know, Wai, you're at the edge of your seat for Saturday to come.
Yes. Thank you,
And
John.
I know everyone was excited for Great American Bash 1988 to arrive on Tuesday on the Post Wrestling Cafe. The fight for freedom. Ric Flair, Lex Luger, freedom at stake. Unfortunately, Lex Luger was not free to bleed, according to the Maryland State Athletic Commission. But we won't spoil this result from 35 years ago. But it's a show that featured quite the ending to a main event and quite the introduction of the Tower of Doom.
The introduction, and I think the end of the Tower of Doom, a one night only thing, a very special triple decker cage. If you are a fan of Ready to Rumble, well, I mean, maybe you'll get to see the inspiration behind the lovely triple decker of cage, and why. You'll question, did they decide to go with that concept? I think it's interesting to think about how you can create a new wrestling match. Like, we don't see new stipulations all that often these days. And I think maybe it's for good reason, because it's incredibly hard to come up with a brand new professional wrestling concept, especially when it's cages. So you'll get to see this experiment from Jim Crockett Promotions from 1988, the Tower of Doom. We had a lot of fun talking about it, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. And John, what did you watch? The Great American Bash 1988.
Where did I watch it?
Yeah, what service?
I was not in Baltimore that night, so I watched it on the WWE Network.
The WWE Network, which in Canada is still very much its own thing. So those of you who want access to it, well, maybe you should get on a VPN. NordVPN, our thanks to sponsor of the show. Of course, once again this week, you know about the financial benefits of using a VPN. You can sign up for cheaper subscriptions in other parts of the world. You know about the benefits of being able to access geo-blocked content, the ability to sign up for services you can't get in your country, like AEW Plus for those of us here in North America. Today, let's talk about online privacy. John, if you do any sort of downloading, and I know you're a huge downloader, John, you know, just like
I'm running Napster as we speak. I just got the new
you just, you know, you still then you must be very concerned, John, about unwanted tracking from advertisers, ISPs, phishing sites, hackers.
I hate it.
Yes. A trusted VPN helps mask your IP to protect your browsing. NordVPN is one of the most established and reputable VPN providers in the field, rated 4.5 out of 5, according to PC Mag. With over 5,000 servers from around the world, Nord has doubled down on keeping you safe with their new threat protection feature. Even if you download an infected file, threat protection kicks in and deletes it before it makes a mess of your computer.
Ooh.
Sign up. Yeah, you don't want that, John. I mean, you know, you have enough trouble, I think, with your drinks next to your laptop. You know, you don't need viruses getting in the way as well. So sign up through nordvpn.com/postwrestling. Receive a bonus month on all 2-year subscriptions with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And if you don't like it after the 30 days, just cancel it. Pretend it never happened. Again, nordvpn.com/postwrestling. Let them know you found out about them through us. Our thanks again to Nord for their support of Post.
Yes. And that will take us into Dynamite from Wednesday night at the Canada Life Center in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Brought to you by Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Is this going to get a 4.5 out of 5 from PC Magazine?
Something tells me it's not. I don't know how well these DC movies tend to do. They could certainly use the good press. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how this one will do.
DC needs a win, doesn't it? Well,
sorry, you just cut out there.
That's okay. Not a good sign for Shazam's Fury of the Gods that it's killing our signal as we speak. But nonetheless, in all seriousness, this was, you know, a clear sign of like their importance of AEW to just be a poster for this show all night long. Like they had the signage all over the ring, the entrance. They aired a trailer later in the show. So didn't quite understand the tie-in with the international title, but it was presented all over the show.
I wonder what they could have tied it in to that would have made sense.
Maybe when the orange punch hit, like a graphic like the Batman series could have popped up and gone Shazam over the screen.
I think they should have had -1 come out in the final match, and then he could have, or like, you know, in the Dark Order match, he could have said Shazam and turned into like an older version, big version of -1.
That's the whole Stu Grayson.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if Preston Vance wasn't, you know, split up, I mean, he would have been really a perfect Shazam, like Captain Marvel to -1.
Well, it started with the Bar Mitzvah as MJF came out alongside 4 women, and Excalibur says that bar mitzvahs are usually not this bad. And MJF immediately sets the tone by telling the audience that Shawn was better than Brett. So I think he was coming out here with the expectation that he might get cheered. So he had this one immediately to diffuse the crowd. So he says that his religion is the only one that matters. They are the chosen people. He already had his bar mitzvah, but after March 5th, he became the best wrestler in the world. He is not merely a human, but is an Iron Man, and is probably the moniker he will be going by now.
Would they have enjoyed the Iron Man plug, you know, on a show dedicated to Shazam?
I don't know if that might have crossed promotional guidelines for DC.
Disney character.
That's right. Yes. So then the bar mitzvah itself begins, and we get the individuals running down with the chair. Forgive me, I don't know what this is called, but this seemed like a lot of fun, and the crowd was into this. They were clapping along. They're holding hands around the chair, and then Jack Perry has to ruin the party and interrupts this. I almost thought this was a bit of this crowd was not ready for this to end so quickly.
Maybe culturally insensitive. to come in and ruin somebody's rebar mitzvah.
Yeah, it's like this Jack Perry is living in the Stone Ages.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing you don't have that report yet, John?
I do. Do you want us to get
from
our official
Please.
correspondent, Jonathan Pine? I thought they did a good job. Sadly, we didn't get a Cantor singing his theme song or a Bema, but the visual of the chosen people rushing down the entrance ramp with a chair to perform the horror with MJF was fantastic. The added touch of the blue and white streamers and balloons was very nice. I was hoping they would recite, I'm not even going to try this word, the shit. I can't for the life of me pronounce this. This is like the hardest word I have ever seen in my life. No, I owe it to people to try this one. The Shehecha Chan Yanu. I have no idea. Work the phlegm for the second he says in this. The traditional Jewish prayer that is said before events, but he can save that for the fall during the high holidays. A 10 out of 10 segment. I can't wait for MJF to have a child so we can have our first pro wrestling bris.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if we'll get that one on Dynamite. Maybe on Rampage. I don't know. Thank you, John Pine. I wanted to go to this one too because it comes to us from David Porges from Israel, who sends $69.90 Israeli denomination.
Yeah, not dollars.
Yeah, not dollars. He says it was nice to see some Jewish representation on Dynamite. Don't remember the hot girls making out part in my bar mitzvah though. Mazel tov on your birthday away. I'll be donating to WWF Canada in your name. Thank you so much. Yes.
You should definitely explain where he's donating to.
Yeah.
Way has joined the WWE, folks.
I've joined the WWF.
He's launching the Canadian office once again, and he is the new Carl DeMarco of Canada.
That's it. Yeah. No. I wish. I'm actually doing a CN Tower climb a month from now, and it's in support of the WWF, the World Wildlife Fund. And I'm trying to raise funds. So if you go to my social media at Way0937, you will find a link if you so choose to support my goal of reaching all 1,776 steps of the CN Tower. So yeah, very funny. Thank you very, very much, David, for the support. Anyway, so comprehensive coverage, I would say, of this rebar mitzvah. So what's the consensus here? Hot girls aside, was it accurate?
It sounds like they were very faithful to the bar mitzvah tradition.
Okay. Well, wonderful.
So Jungle Boy is out, but before he can speak, Sammy Guevara comes out, and then Darby Allin. So we get the four pillars in the ring together, and
standing in each corner.
They're in each corner. Yes, I did like the layout of this whole thing. And MJF is furious for all of them trying to ruin his rebar mitzvah. All of them in sync state that they want a title match. And we get each one getting their chance to make their case. Jungle Boy states that at Double or Nothing 2020, MJF cheated to beat him. And after that match, MJF went on to be handed everything while I continued on Dark. You've never wrestled on Dark. You've never wrestled on Elevation. I don't think you've even wrestled on Rampage. This locker room busts its ass, and they try to get maybe 60 seconds a week of TV time while you take up 20 minutes for the same hokey bullshit you've been doing for 4 years. This place revolves around you, and the first step to correcting that is taking the title off of you. MJF explains, unlike you and everyone else in that locker room, I'm actually a star here. And Guevara pipes in stating that he will make this rebar mitzvah a re-circumcision, which is quite the threat.
How would that work?
I don't know how you re-circumcise.
I would hate to even imagine. Like what? They didn't get it all the first time?
I don't know. This would probably be where Warner Brothers Discovery does put their foot down on content. He says that you talk too much. You kissed ass to get here. Meanwhile, I had to grind and work at Whataburger and Subway to get here. And I was initially told that I was just going to be the Inner Circle's job guy and take bumps for Jericho. But I went on, I became a champion, and the machine never pushed me. And he's telling this story, and it's like his rise and working hard and taking all these dead-end jobs to get here to a company. And then just out of nowhere, like, not like these Canadian idiots, it just comes out of nowhere. It's like this whole crowd was behind Sammy Guevara, and then he just reminds them, yeah, I hate all of you. And
he became too much of a babyface, I think he realized.
I guess so, but to me, for this night, I think you could have just rode this wave, and you were basically going to be with one of the biggest baby faces on the show in the main event. So I don't think we really had to just throw this line in to make sure you get booed at the end of it. It just felt so off from the message. And then Darby is the last one here, and he speaks of going to film school 10 years ago, and he turned in a film and was told to change everything because we don't accept movies of this nature. And I think... Yeah.
No, knowing that Darby went to film school, I kind of feel explains a whole lot, you know, not just maybe about like obviously the creativity, but also the films, the short films that he seems to do every single weekend, and just maybe also a lot.
I would love to know the other side of this conversation with the professor that has their side of the story. It was like, no. There was nothing about what was on the video. We could not show this video to in a classroom. Okay, this was basically a snuff film. Yeah. So he, instead of editing the movie, he dropped out of school and became a pro wrestler, that's one solution to your problem. And he told everyone he would either succeed or fail as Darby Allin, but he would never change. And he might be the worst businessman, but he told Tony Khan, I will never be the subject of a bidding war because I'm never going to leave, which is the Jay Briscoe story that everyone told after his passing, that, you know, when him and Mark's contracts were coming up, they would go in and they'd sit down, and before they even get into talking, Jay would go, now let's just get this out of the way. There ain't no way we're leaving here. And they just throw their leverage out the window. So looks like Darby took from that school of thought. And then speaks about the fact that he is so sick of grown wrestlers complaining on Twitter about their television time, about contracts, and that includes you, MJF, with this bidding war crap. And AEW means more to me than it does to you. And if I don't get what I want, then I'm going to complain on Twitter. I'm just joking. I'm going to attack you with my skateboard and beat you with a headlock takeover. A callback to their match at Full Gear 2021. And this was almost like the roast of MJF. And then at the end, he gets the mic to go through each one. And he takes off his glasses, revealing his eyes all messed up from the match against Danielson that you could see. I mean, it looked even worse when he posted the photo last week where that knot that we mentioned was on his forehead. It had drained into his eye. So his eye, it looked like he had a broken orbital, but did not.
They were bloodshot. Yeah.
It looked terrible, but he's got like black eyes. Like he looked
black eyes. I kind of sense more might have more been makeup, but I mean, like they did not look good. No.
And he says that, you know, Jungle Boy with Christian, Sammy Guevara with Jericho, and Darby with Sting. He's the only one that never had to enroll in AEW Daddy Daycare and have allegiances. You guys are all pillars, but I'm the only one that can keep this place up. I've beaten each one of you in singles matches, and tells them all to leave. Pie faces Jungle Boy, and it leads to a big brawl, and MJF gets knocked off the apron and into his cake, keeping the tradition alive of cakes in professional wrestling. But this was a very rare 20-minute opening segment on Dynamite.
Yeah. And I know, like, maybe, you know, AEW has shied away from it because it's such a trope of a WWE show to start the show off with a 20-minute segment. I certainly didn't mind it here. And in fact, I kind of enjoyed, you know, the emphasis on getting to see the personalities of several of these other, you know, roster members. I mean, MJF, of course, like they're complaining about him taking up the show too much with these 20-minute segments. But I mean, look at the spot that where he's at. You know, he's a guy who could talk this well, and I think he's definitely deserving of these, 20-minute spots. The other three, I thought this was a great way to maybe elevate the other three pillars, because you already have MJF in a very credible and a very established main event role. And now to give that level of spotlight to some of these others, certainly at least diminishes that gap a little bit more. Jungle Boy, I think, really benefits. I thought he had some great lines here, and I don't know if like he's believable right now as a title contender, but at least he should, put himself in the conversation so that he eventually gets to be seen that way. Sammy Guevara, I kind of feel like is way down. Like he could talk, and I thought he sounded great here, but he's been such a faction guy for so long, and like it's definitely maybe hardest for me to take him seriously. Darby, I think, is very much next in line. He's a guy who has just been fantastic in singles feuds. He's been multiple time TNT champion, and I think he's the type of guy that the crowd is certainly ready to see take that next step, at least challenging for a world championship. And I see him coming out of this as the one that MJF might face next. Probably not big enough for a pay-per-view match, but I mean, for a big edition of Dynamite, I like that a lot.
So you're seeing one coming out of this. You don't see a 4-way as a potential direction.
Not necessarily.
Because I think that is sort of what you're left here, of like the idea of the 4 pillars. Like, this is as ready a time as you can to, if you were to do such a match, this would seem like the time to do it. And to be quite honest, when I look at this, like, this is a viable path that you can do. And you could certainly get a lot of matches out of this. You could also do the 4-way. Mm-hmm. I also feel that if you're stating that like there's this countdown clock attached to his career, MJF and Sting, there is something to that match that I think would generate a lot of interest from people.
No doubt. Absolutely.
And you could argue that might be like of the available options of just something different, and MJF being the perfect person that could be put in that kind of a situation. Like, I think there's something there with an MJF Sting match. It's to do at some point before Sting is done.
It would be fun, but I mean, Sting hasn't had a singles match in AEW yet,
that's part of the intrigue.
Yeah. I guess like, I wonder if we want to break down that mystique. Like, it could potentially expose Sting, to put him in the ring for that long. He can't just rely on like a big stunt, like he has to actually wrestle at an MJF world title standard. And are they brave enough to put him in that situation?
I think if you threw on like title versus career as well, I mean, that is like, that's a big match that you can do. And Sting has not missed in these matches, and I think this would be the next challenge of doing a main event world title match that is a different level of ask on Sting, who is 63 this year, 64.
Yeah, I feel like his retirement match at this point might if he chooses to retire, I think it makes maybe more sense to have Darby, be that person. But that's also incredibly difficult, like maybe even more difficult than an MJF match for Sting to go alone.
Well, they showed highlights of Premier Heather Stephenson handing Jericho an honorary street name. I think it was the street he grew up on that they temporarily named Chris Jericho Way.
Temporarily? So what? How long do they?
I think that's the gimmick in all the places. When you name the city, it's like it's they put up a sign, but it's not permanently renamed the city. Because
it would be a real nuisance for all the people that live there, right? To have to change their addresses and
a pain
driver's license.
Imagine having to update your credit card to reflect your new street name. It would just be way too much work. But it's a nice gesture when someone's in town. John Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, and Wheeler Yuta against Hangman Page, Evil Uno, and Stu Grayson. If there was a guy that, to me, made a hell of an argument to be rehired, it was Stu Grayson. I thought he was fantastic in this match.
No doubt. Yeah. I kind of feel like, this was an audience that recognizes that Stu Grayson is no longer a part of this company. And they recognize, of course, that he's Canadian, and they saw this as a special attraction to see Stu Grayson back. And they certainly let him wrestle like he was a special attraction tonight.
They hit Grayson with a spike pile driver on the floor, and then Moxley hits him with a second one in the ring. The hot tag is made to Hangman, and the crowd goes nuts. And eventually, Moxley is tagged in with Hangman, and the crowd gets to their feet in anticipation just to see these two guys fight again. And it sees Page hit a big lariat, but then Yuta stops the buckshot by nailing Hangman with the ring bell. So Hangman is down on the floor. Uno and Grayson continue to fight, and Uno's knee gets chop blocked. Grayson then dives over the corner with a dive onto Claudio, and Uno hits the paradigm shift onto Moxley. Grayson returns with the 450, and this crowd, they are biting on near falls that Uno and Grayson are going to pin Jon Moxley. They hit the fatality on Moxley. Yuta is in for the save, and then Grayson dives for the tag. Uno is yanked to the floor, and it ends with the pop-up uppercut onto Grayson, and Moxley applying the rear naked choke for the tap in 13:25. Won't release the hold, so he puts the bulldog choke on as Uno is in, and then the BCC triple team Uno, and that leads to Silver and Reynolds running down as BCC exits through the crowd. But man, this was a great 6-man to open the show.
Really, really excellent match. You know, we continue to see what the BCC look like as heels, and I mean, they're arguably better than when they are as baby faces because they're just that much more vicious and very easy to hate. Surprisingly, you know, given that Moxley is such a fan favorite, but it's especially when you have somebody that I think they're very strategically brought back in a Stu Grayson, who seemed very beloved by this Winnipeg crowd. It was very easy to hate the BCC for, you know, continuing to beat him up and to hold that choke on for a little too long. I love seeing the Smash Brothers, you know, do their double team moves. Crowd reacted really well to those. And yeah, this is, you know, the BCC furthering themselves into the dark side. This week now they're actually cheating using weapons. They're continuing to attack after the bell. It's been a sort of a descent into, you know, heelness that has felt logical and organic.
Juice Robinson cut a promo about attacking Ricky Starks last week and dropping him on his previously injured neck, and the replays of this look pretty incredible, where they pretty much spiked Ricky right on top of his head in the attack last week. Jade Cargill is out, and the whack-ass Canadian challenge is answered by 17-year veteran Nicole Matthews. I thought this was cool that Nicole Matthews, I think, like, obviously, if you're following Shimmer over the years or women's wrestling, you know, she is a name that you would know, but I could imagine there's an audience, too, that doesn't know her. But, you know, long-time wrestler going back to 2006, and the bell rings and boom, she's hit with a pump kick and jaded, and she gets pinned in 42 seconds. So anyway, she was pretty much our distraction for the next whack-ass Canadian as Renee gets into the ring and asks Jade what she is looking for in her competition. And Jade looks at Renee, "Aren't you from Canada?" and takes the microphone away from her and asks if that is all Canada has to offer. And thus, Taya Valkyrie comes out to answer the challenge. Excalibur has heard the rumor that she is a free agent, and she drills Layla Gray in the ring and hits the Road to Valhalla. And it seemed like the announcers either... It almost seemed like they more so sold it as she was using Jade's move onto Layla Gray. But in fact, we have a feud here with women that have the same finisher. And right after the segment, we get the All Elite graphic for Taya Valkyrie, who is done with Impact Wrestling and is now with All Elite Wrestling.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I think it was probably to the advantage of the story to, you know, play it up as if she was stealing Jade's move. And then maybe in the future they could explain that, oh, Taya Valkyrie happens to do this move as well. For my money, I thought it looked better than Jade's. So maybe that's something. I like the fact that, you know, they're not simply having somebody change their finisher because somebody on the roster already uses it. The fact that they both do it just happens to, you know, allow you to build to a feud between the two. Yeah. You know, Nicole Matthews.
It should be the story that, like, here Jade has won all her matches with this move, and here's the person that is an expert with this move and how to avoid it. Like, you can do some interesting stuff with this. And it's at least some kind of story for Jade, as opposed to just beating the female victim of the week.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like when you break down those 54 wins, I mean, I think maybe less than a handful that, you know, you might actually consider to be established stars. And Taya is certainly up there. It's an interesting feud for them to book. Ultimately, I think Jade probably continues to win this one. But somehow Taya Valkyrie has to kind of come out of this feeling like somebody who, you know, is a star. She's somebody who had some NXT exposure. She's had a lot of Impact exposure. On the big stage, though, I
didn't get too much NXT exposure.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how well known she is outside of like, a hardcore wrestling audience, but the talent is there. The ability is there. So they just have to kind of show it off.
She got a
So,
good reaction when, the graphic
mhm.
came up on the screen. Like they recognized the name instantly. It was a good reaction. They had over 7,000 people in the building in Winnipeg.
Yeah. Does she join the Outcasts, I suppose? Does she qualify as a former WWE freelancer employee?
I don't think she was there long enough to be considered a freelancer,
Hmm,
and
okay.
really wouldn't fit the role that they're putting her here in as the babyface opposite Jade. So
Right.
probably not. Then they had a first we had a Ricky Stark stating that it's easy to attack me from behind. Juice is jealous. He's done nothing in AEW. Bullet Club was relevant in 2015 and challenges him to bring it any place, anytime. So Juice is irrelevant, and I am going to waste my time with him. That was what the promo was.
Yeah. Well, he seemed to invite more members of the Bullet Club to come and attack him at any point. So who joins him? Who joins Juice from the BC?
Chase Owens,
Yujiro. I
Yujiro
mean, is House of
Takahashi.
Darkness still Bullet
House
Club?
of Torture.
House of Torture. Are they still Bullet Club at this point?
They're a subsidiary. They're like
Okay.
Anthem Sports Group.
Yes.
They recapped Wardlow's loss last week, and we get the debut of QTV. This was done in the style of TMZ, and we've got QT as Harvey Levin, and we get a reenactment of Aaron Solo breaking into Wardlow's car and stealing the TNT title. And then they proceeded to just call.
I don't know if this was supposed to be a reenactment. I think they're supposed to, have you think that
The
this
idea
actual
is that
footage.
this was all a work last week. The break-in.
That they broke in to Wardlow's car.
Yes. So I guess you can leave that to your own conclusions. If this one just feels too weird that this was not them just capitalizing on last week's story to make an angle out of it. Like
Wardlow didn't I think he legitimately had his car broken into.
That's what I'm saying. But you had a lot of people after this segment that thought that this was all an angle, and I did not draw that conclusion at all.
I didn't either.
There was no point to stealing there was no point to any of this other than you're capitalizing on something that you were handed.
They made an angle out of a real life event is how I took it.
Okay. Well, then this was a reenactment.
In real life it is, but in story we're supposed to believe that this was them actually breaking into QT's car the first time.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they just wailed on, they just buried Wardlow here as a Batista wannabe. And that was great. And then QT tossed Wardlow's passport away because apparently last week when they were in the U.S., he was traveling around with his passport for whatever reason. And
you knew he was going to come to Canada and just, decided to have it on him in case.
Okay. Welcome to Will's World, bitch. And that's how this ended. So is this going to have a longer run than Power Slap, QTV? Because the reaction online was similar to Power Slap.
Really? I didn't hate it. I mean, listen, I to me, it's a question of whether or not Hobbs should be a part of this. I felt like it was good for QT. I felt like it was good for Aaron Solo. And I don't know if you noticed, but RJ City was in the background as well the entire time.
I did not notice that. So great eye.
So he's bound to, I guess, hopefully have a role at some point. I think he'll be great in it as well. I like it as just sort of like an entertaining thing. To me, Hobbs is still a bit of a weird fit for it.
I agree. This was certainly an odd role for Hobbs to be in, but I think they'll probably continue with this. And there's an open challenge for Hobbs that he has set out for Rampage on Friday. We'll get to the opponent later. Orange Cassidy, Jeff Jarrett for the new International Championship. Cassidy swapped the old belt with the new one. I cannot decipher the difference between these two titles. When he held it up, it looked a whole lot identical to the All Atlantic title.
It's exactly the same. It just says International instead of All Atlantic.
So did they spend a lot of money on a new title that's identical?
I mean,
it's their backup title in case someone breaks into Cassidy's car.
It's sure. It's not really a new title. They realized All Atlantic was a stupid name.
Okay. Well, it's now the international title. Does that mean it's only defended on international soil?
Well, what's international? Everything's international.
All the flags.
Sure.
All the
Okay.
flags that are represented on the belt.
Only the flags? Well, that would be really limiting, but
Well, the All Atlantic moniker did not limit them either.
yeah. So what does it mean?
It's a belt that Orange Cassidy holds. We can call it the Orange Cassidy title. This was a match that just had Jeff Jarrett being Jeff Jarrett for 13 and a half minutes, and the audience, they got into it. A lot of it was built on Orange Cassidy's existing knee injury that continues to plague him. He did a leapfrog, lands on the knee, and thus Jeff goes to town on this knee. He goes for the figure four, but instead puts on the sharpshooter. I'm sure people were drawing straws as to who gets the sharpshooter spot in Canada tonight. So Jeff Jarrett won, and won the contest to use the sharpshooter. Cassidy reverses it, and with all due respect, Orange Cassidy, this was one of the ugliest sharpshooters I've ever seen in my life. And
we found an uglier sharpshooter than the Rocks, and unfortunately, it went to Orange Cassidy. I mean, he does have the excuse of having that knee injury that he was, I guess, selling, but man, this was not good.
Yeah, I'm if maybe Brett's gonna be asked about this one.
He was definitely a Sean guy, I'm guessing. Orange Cassidy.
So the sleeper gets reversed. Satnam Singh then snaps Orange's neck on the top rope, and Jarrett gets the figure four. Then Jarrett shoves Cassidy into Bryce Remsburg. So Dutt slides the guitar in. Aubrey Edwards comes in, snatches the guitar away, and Jarrett threatens to hit her. And then Satnam takes the guitar from Orange Cassidy, and Orange Cassidy does the Eddie Guerrero, laying on the floor, holding his knee. So Dutt and Singh get ejected, and then Orange makes his comeback with a satellite DDT, does a one-legged kip-up, and Bryce is staggering, and he's with Jarrett as Lethal runs in to nail Cassidy with the Golden Globe. This set a new record for referee distractions and spots behind their backs. I mean, you just have to turn your head off at a certain point to this. Trent then runs down to take out Jay Lethal. My notes are getting very long for this match of all the characters involved. The knee buckles on the orange punch attempt, but then Cassidy blocks the stroke, lands the orange punch, and wins in 13:36. I thought this worked for the crowd, but my God, were there like so much in this match that your head was spinning by all of the twists and turns to get this crowd to believe Jarrett was going to win, and then ultimately Cassidy prevails.
So, watching this match might have been maybe a big part of the reason why I'm so hesitant on seeing a Sting singles match in a big sort of.
Oh, you're right, because this is what you would need for a Sting 25-minute singles match at the very least.
There were a lot of bells and whistles in this match. This was Jeff Jarrett's first singles match in AEW, so you can understand it. But God, did they overload this thing with just way too many gimmicks. Cassidy's knee, the brawl in the crowd that inexplicably occurred. This international?
In the picture-in-picture, they brawl into the crowd, and they're out of this ring forever. And then Bryce, when we come back, he's admonishing Jarrett to get in the ring. It's like, why? We've been out of the ring for about 5 minutes at this
point. Was pretty awful. Yeah, like on AEW Plus, they just explained that referee's discretion. He probably doesn't want a title change, due to double count out.
We're in the home of the Winnipeg Jets. That means it's NHL playoff rules.
Yeah, well, maybe they're using New Japan rules suddenly because this, as part of the international rules,
it was longer than a 20 count.
I mean, really, they should have just turned this thing into a no count out match if they were going to brawl that long throughout the commercial. That was ridiculous. You had two referees, you had a guitar, you had a Golden Globe, all the Satnam and Sanjay stuff, Jay Lethal coming in, Trent, way too much bullshit for a match that I think AEW should never have. Like, AEW has made its sort of like reputation on like really solid wrestling. And yeah, you can have bullshit once in a while, but this was way too much. I did not enjoy this.
Yeah, I like the knee stuff with Cassidy, and I did think like the audience, like they did respond well to Jarrett, but I fell more into it just by a certain point, by the Lethal run-in, like the stuff behind the refs' backs, it's if you're building up and you do a match like this, you can get away with it, but it is such a encumbrance to have this as such a trope for so many of your matches of just behind the refs' backs. They overusing it would be too kind.
I think like they could have gone all the way wacky with something like this as they have like in maybe other matches. I think if there was the Shazam integration, if it was all done for that reason, then okay, yeah, like I might have excused it, but you didn't even have that. So ultimately, like this was only maybe in promotion of
If
that.
this is a preview for the movie, I do not want to see this movie. I don't want to see 2 hours of this.
Are there guitar shots or, I don't know.
Golden Globe, perhaps.
Probably not.
Then the preview for the main event. So only 4 matches on this card. But obviously you wanted a lot of time for the main event and you had a 20-minute segment to open the show. So lower match count than usual. The Acclaimed had a music video, and this wasn't like a diss track. It was just us hanging out with the fans, and
it was a celebration. Hey man, does every rap song have to be a diss track? Come on, old school. People just like talked about partying and just, having a good time. That's seemingly what this was.
For a show that I am constantly told, it's just we are fighting for television time, that it's so precious. I just didn't know what the point of this 60 seconds was.
I guess the point was to give you an Acclaimed segment to, keep them in people's minds now that they're not in title contention. Yeah, it was just kind of there. Like, you definitely in wrestling, maybe you want more of the diss track. You want him to invade somebody's house.
I mean, they are doing the program with Menard and Parker, who we would hear from later. But first, the Outcasts are out, Wai's favorite group, and they've got their video for their entrance. They're equipped with their spray paint, all in tandem. Ruby says there was a time that the grass was greener in AEW until a couple of bitches came and pissed on that grass. And they are coming to show that AEW is their house. And without them, there would be no division. So I was trying to break this down. So they are the bitches. That this place used to be great.
No. They're not the bitches. It was other people. Like, they're referring to the others that are the bitches.
But they said the grass was greener at a time until these bitches came. How could the grass have been greener when the originals were there? Who made the grass greener?
I think she's referring to other originals that have come in to
There's
ruin
tiers
the
of
grass.
originals? How can
Sure.
you be...
You're
either an original or you're not an original.
You can't group all the originals.
This is like pregnant or not pregnant.
I just don't know if Ruby was, calling.
So the
Saraya.
original originals were okay. They made this place great. But then the second level of originals came and pissed all over this.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
But Baker is an original.
Right.
Because I thought they were referring to themselves. Like, they have come here and ruined this place. But then they contradicted themselves,
why would she
saying,
do that?
Well, I didn't get this at all, because I was going by the belief that we're the bitches that have come and pissed on this grass, but then they're explaining without us, there would be no division. So have you ruined this place, or have you been the saviors of this division?
Yeah, I mean, it would make no sense for Ruby to complain about themselves ruining this thing. Ruby was saying that this was the place to be. This was the, where the grass was greener. But then people like
us.
No. People who are some other people that, like, maybe Jamie Hayter, it wasn't somebody that was
she's
exactly
a mid-tier original.
The mid-tier originals came in and ruined it.
Okay. So Tony Storm and Saraya, they are not mid-tier. They are
No.
Okay, they're here to clean this. They're here to save the division.
They're here to save the grass.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. And Baker is just guilty by association. She's an original, but she's friends with the mid-tier, and that brings you down to the mid-tier originals.
Sure, yeah.
I was not hating this angle, and now I'm getting back to that. Saraya calls herself a miracle and refers to the fans as neck, beard, stinky twats. Tony then just decides, can we be more blatant with our insults? The answer was yes, because Tony gets the mic. Hey, fat people. Storm brings up how she was the interim champion, not the real champion, and the fans loved when I lost the title to Jamie Hayter. And you people don't know what you want. And we are here to give them change in this division. And we are going through all of the rookies. And then she goes to list them off and then goes through from Sky Blue all the way up to Baker and Hayter. And thus Hayter and Baker run out. And they were definitely aware of their location, because these two came to Canada prepared with some official Canadian tuxedos. This was like Britney and Justin Timberlake at an award show in 2000.
That is correct. Yeah. Not a look I often really see in the streets, at least not in Toronto, maybe other parts of the country.
No, this is not a thing in Canada, but it is something.
Well, not in Toronto, at least. But even in the rest of Canada, like
no one does this. Ironically, outside of Halloween, and
yeah,
if you do,
and people
it's
don't
by
say
total mistake.
Exactly, yeah. Or maybe I don't know. You're like, auditioning for the Strokes cover band or something. Nor do people say a.
Yeah, I'll be self-conscious if I do. So Hayter and Baker, they go to spray paint Ruby, but Storm and Saraya stop them, and Destination Unknown is hit to Baker, Storm Zero on Hayter, but then Rio runs down with Willow Nightingale, Sky Blue, and they chase them off. So we have our second-tier originals of Britt Baker, Jamie Hayter, Riho, who's another original, Willow Nightingale, and Sky Blue. So the multiverse of originals against the Outcasts continues, and we now have a 5-on-3 numbers situation.
Right, yeah. We need a
chart.
Yeah, really. It's hard for me to. In my notes, I wrote down good segment, but you certainly, made me question that, John.
Sorry, I pissed all over this segment.
Yeah, this lovely grass now suddenly has a yellow spot. I thought I all in all, I'm happy to see that the feud is finally at a point where we can, say that there are two sides and we know what the characters are. I'm happy to see people like Riho, Sky Blue, and Willow take a step up and be featured in an actual story. I think those are positives. I think the fact that the heels now truly do feel like heels with a purpose, it's all a positive thing. I think they built off of Ruby's promo last week. Well, that little sort of, confusion aside.
You know who's taken over the mantle of the Ruby Soho near-fall face?
Who's that?
Athena.
Okay.
I watched her match with Willow Nightingale. Very good match last week on Ring of Honor. I've got to say, I watched Ring of Honor over the weekend. I'm really getting into that show. Like, it is long, but it does not drag for me. And it's almost like it's AEW, but it's like a slowed down version. It's matches, it's a couple of angles, and it's a fun watch so far. Like, I genuinely enjoyed watching the second episode when I did.
That's a good review. Yeah. I'm at the point now where I'm like still cherry picking, matches that I hear a lot about, like the main event from last week. So I think it seems like anybody who's paying for it, like I get the sense that they're happy with $9.99 a month for what they're getting. So hey, maybe more people will sign up.
Menard and Parker, they explain they love rap music and that the Acclaimed could win a Tony Award. And they're playing hard to get after turning down the J.A.S. twice. So Menard and Parker are going to give them a reminder why they should respect them. So tune into Rampage. So I left this out. I literally wrote down Menard and Parker versus the Acclaimed on Rampage. No, they want the Acclaimed to tune into Rampage to get up that 18-49 number because it's Menard and Parker against the Bollywood Boys.
Yeah, Return of the Bollywood Boys.
Yes,
more
they were
Canadians.
on the Toronto shows last October. Taya Valkyrie will have her first AEW match, and Powerhouse Hobbs versus Ray Phoenix for the TNT title. So that's an interesting lineup right there for Rampage.
Yeah,
coming off the hot number last week, which Brandon Thurston did get the quarters. It was a very successful first quarter, and then kind of went down. Riho was not the giant difference maker to that number, but the big match was the opener with Guevara and Action Andretti.
Interesting. Okay, there you go. So yeah, I mean, Taya Valkyrie making her in-ring debut, I think that seems big, even though it'll probably be a bit of a squash match, but it's something attractive.
Maybe they're gonna hold on to Nicole Matthews gets a second match in Winnipeg that night. She
get another 60 seconds.
Well, we're gonna give you a minute to take the exact same move that Jade gave you.
She should have the same match, like pump kick.
She beats her in 41 seconds, 1 second faster than Jade. Poor Nicole Matthews. And Dynamite next week. The only thing they've announced so far is Hook and Stokely Hathaway in the no DQ match that has been set up since the pay-per-view. Main event. This is last 20-25 minutes of the show. House of Black, the Elite, and the Jericho Appreciation Society for the trios titles. Huge chant for Kenny as he comes out. And then we've got Ted Irvin Chris's father in the front row. He looked so happy to be at this show. And Jericho, Garcia, and Guevara come out last. Enormous reaction. Obviously, Kenny and Jericho, the big stars of this match. And Kenny had these awesome tights of like the Omega logo with the Winnipeg Jets colors. Very cool tights that Omega had.
He was going to be a hockey player at one point.
He was like a very good hockey player at one point. So the crowd is chanting "Holy shit" before it even begins. Huge reaction when Jericho gets tagged in. So then Omega tags in. They were very smart. Like they could have given a cow its run for its money of how they milked locking up in this match. They teased this for this crowd so many times before they finally went at it, and this crowd, they just wanted to see these two go at it, and they made them wait for it, and it was well done. There was a point in this where Omega's on the floor and he was Irish whipped into the steps, and the way his knee went into these steps, it felt like he hit these steps before he was ready for it, and it just looked like a nasty Irish whip right into the corner of the steps with his knee, but did not inhibit him from the rest of his spots in this match. Omega was in with Matthews. He's hitting snapdragons to Black and King. And then Omega and Jericho come back in. The crowd this time, they get to their feet, and the House of Black comes after them, and they beat them down. And again, they milk it before drilling one another, and there's a huge pop as they're battling each other. Jericho gets nailed with this V-trigger. Looked like he took his head off. And Omega goes back to snapdragons, and then a V-trigger gets stopped when Jericho puts on the walls. The Bucks break that up with double super kicks, and they hit them all around. All 6 are down. We go to another picture-in-picture break. We saw the Terminator dive by Kenny Omega to the floor, and then the BCC and Dark Order are shown in the back brawling. It's Hangman Page alongside Silver and Reynolds, and they explain that Uno was taken to the hospital and Stu Grayson went with him. So, great endorsement of Canadian healthcare, of how quick you can be taken care of. It won't cost Uno. It won't cost Uno.
True.
One Uno. So, the Meltzer driver gets stopped when Jericho catches Nick with a code breaker. Guevara hits a big shooting star onto Matt, but King makes the save. And then we get Dante's Inferno onto Jericho, but Kenny saves Jericho. And that allows Jericho to grab the bat. He nails Brody King with the bat, and Guevara hits a shooting star to the Elite on the floor. Brody then kicks out of a Jericho cover, and it's a black mass to Jericho as he's setting up for the Judas effect, and Dante's Inferno onto Daniel Garcia as the House of Black pin Garcia in 21:45. This crowd was electric for the start of this match, the middle of this match, the final minutes of this match. When that 3 count was hit, dude, it was Sami Zayn losing to Roman Reigns times 100. It was the air immediately. It was like they could not believe that they lost. It was just such a deflating end as they realized the House of Black had won.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it either. And you can't tell me that this was a crowd that was like expecting a title change tonight. I mean, shit, like this was House of Black
convinced
just won.
themselves that one of the Winnipeg guys was winning the titles, because I cannot remember a match that it was so a punch to the gut of 7,000 people instantly.
Yeah, I'm very curious about exactly like what the reaction was, why that reaction was so weird.
Jericho and Omega were super over to this crowd, and that was obviously what they wanted. But my God, I was stunned at just how deflating it was at the end here. And
hey, man, maybe it tells you, they did a great job of like keeping the focus on Jericho and Kenny and understanding that this was a crowd that simply wanted to see those two in the spotlight, and they gave them that. I felt, like this match I thought was built around them and Brody King, and that was what I continued to be really happy about. Brody
if
King,
anything, to me, Guevara and Garcia really took the back seats in this match, other than Garcia taking, and I say that when Guevara hit like a shooting star to the floor. But of the 9, you're going to have your numbers that, you can't focus on everyone. And it was Jericho and Omega front and center, and then Brody King as well to a secondary degree.
Yeah, like coming out of this match, those are the names I remember the most. I love the fact that this time, like they did on the pay-per-view, but now this time on TV, giving Brody King that spotlight as the big unbeatable guy, even having Jericho and Omega team up together to be able to take him down with a big superplex. I think they're doing such a great job with him, and by extension, the entire House of Black. Does this, tell you any sort of future direction? I mean, there's a post-match, of course, that kind of tells you right there.
Yeah, so to get the crowd back into things, Jake Hager is running down the ramp to assist the J.A.S. and he goes after the House of Black and he's outnumbered. And then the Dark Order and Hangman are brawling with the BCC out to the ring. And at this point, I'm like, this is really smart because suddenly here are 5 trios teams that are all in the mix. And they brawl into the ring, and it's the BCC alone with Hangman Page. It's 3-on-1 when all of a sudden Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks stand by Hangman Page, and this crowd goes nuts as they realize what they are seeing. And you've got Excalibur, who is at an 11, just yelling, "What a moment!" And that's how the show ends with the Ortiz of the Elite -1.
I thought it was a beautiful close, and the way that they set it up with the cut in from the picture-in-picture of them brawling in the back, to the way it played out by the end. They've really not hit on sort of like the Hangman reunion with the Elite for a few weeks at least, but they did kind of sow the seeds, during the last pay-per-view cycle, and to just kind of spring it up on us here at the end of a trios match, now that Hangman, was at least involved at the beginning of the show in a trios, I thought was really wonderful. Really, really great way to close the show. And having the BCC, including Jon Moxley, back up for the first time. I don't recall seeing that before. So does this tell you, can you see this for Blood and Guts? Is this the direction? BCC versus a reunited Elite?
Well, you need some numbers. Yeah, I guess you could do like 4-on-4, but that would require Danielson being back or a new member for BCC. I mean,
Yeah.
BCC, they could pick up a member at some point. It does feel kind of, I say early. It's usually early May that they've done that match. That's 6 weeks or so, 6-7 weeks. So that is a bit of time before this all goes. It just seems to me that when the Elite finally work together, that feels like something like they've been building to this for years at this point now, since the breakup and everyone going their separate ways. That I just wonder, is this just continuing those breadcrumbs? And
this felt too big though. Usually like that would take place in the form of like some backstage skit. This, like having a big crowd reaction and actually like chasing down the BCC it felt pretty direct.
I like this ending a lot because I think both companies could learn from having more of these cliffhangers at the end of the show that you want to tune in next week to see where this goes.
Yeah.
And they've hit on this a lot with the Sami Zayn stuff, but and just seeing like, what's the next chapter? What's going to happen here? That's why I like this for the end of the show. Instead of just ending with a hot match, you ended with a question mark. And that to me is the stuff that can build your audience when you can do week to week stuff like that, where you're tuning in for answers as opposed to just your regular stories progressing.
Yeah. I thought, after like having the Elite kind of come up short for the Trios Championships, twice now, I thought that this would be the time to break them up. But I mean, clearly there's still a lot of story to be told with them as a unit, and even adding, their original members in Hangman Page. And I'm very curious to know if they do add another member, and if that other member is somebody that might be in need of that sort of spotlight. Like that would be a wonderful spot for somebody that's just coming up, the way that like a Wheeler Yuta has benefited so much from being a part of the Blackpool Combat Club. Or could it be Danielson? Could Danielson join the baby or the Elite? That would be really weird, but he, I think, would probably work better as a babyface at this point. Anyway, it's interesting.
So that was the show in Winnipeg. I would say that the main event was an entertaining spectacle, and you got an interesting storyline direction coming out at the end of it. I thought that 6-man was excellent in the opening hour. That was good. And I like the pillar segment as well. Like that's going to be too long of a talking segment for some, but I think sparingly. And if it's done well, then I'm all for it. When
I thought it was, I really enjoyed it because to my recollection, I don't think we've seen the pillars on screen together at one time before, right?
All
Like
four at once? I mean, probably not.
Yeah, like, so to me, that almost felt kind of monumental, you know, like to be able to see these four finally interact with each other and potentially work a program together. Like, it felt like the right timing, you know, after having MJF, the first, you know, of the pillars to headline a pay-per-view and do it in such, like, you know, outstanding fashion. So I enjoyed the show.
Well, we have a lot of feedback, and we will also open it up to super chats if you want to chime in with any thoughts on anything. But we'll do our best to get to as many of these as possible.
Let's go to some of your super chats, and a lot of them actually today. So thank you guys in advance for all your support. We got Edwin B, who sends $5. He says MJF is the champion and hates New Japan Pro Wrestling. How will Forbidden Door 2 go? Will MJF even show up? If he did, who does he face? That's a really interesting point, Edwin.
Yeah, I think that there is a great story there of him taking on somebody, and who it is. You know,
could be anybody on the roster.
Yeah, you don't really have to be limited to any particular person, but with this story of, like, he is the Iron Man, he is the best wrestler in the world. Like, he should be taking on somebody that is.
Well, first of all, it has to be somebody who can lose, because the world champion's not going to lose. And last year, that duty went to Hiroshi Tanahashi, did it not? Moxley beat Tanahashi. I kind of feel like Tanahashi is sort of like the perfect guy again this year to take a loss. Is that too much? I wouldn't complain, you know, to see an MJF versus Hiroshi Tanahashi match. I think that sounds awesome. I don't see it being Okada. I don't see it being Naito. I don't think they would have Naito lose to MJF. What do you think?
Maybe a Shibata. Maybe that's your match. But you know what? They're about to use Shibata on the ROH show. Yeah,
that's an interesting question too. Whether or not Shibata has, like, actual presence on Forbidden Door. Like last year, he did the pose down with Orange Cassidy, right? But, like, we know New Japan doesn't want to use him for whatever reason. But will they allow him on a joint show with AEW?
Depends if Mike Tyson's on commentary.
Sure. Yeah. My pick is Tanahashi. Like, that feels right, you know, from a babyface heel perspective. Even though he was sort of in the similar role last year.
Yeah. It's you could certainly go a couple different directions.
But
if it's a singles match.
Yeah. You have to, at this point, kind of question, like, what sort of foresight MJF had ahead of this pay-per-view, because he's been, like, you know, attacking New Japan Pro Wrestling for years now, it feels like, and he's now in a perfect position to go completely anti New Japan Pro Wrestling as the champion of AEW and somebody presumably in the main event of Forbidden Door. So, you know, I think New Japan has to come back strong with somebody defending its honor. So
yeah, because you will babyface him to a portion of the audience too. Right.
So thank you so much for that, Edwin. So this next series of you might have to help me out here, John, because John Pine, or Rebar Mitzvah Revere himself, has a proper pronunciation. Thank you so much, John, for the super chat. He says Shahechianu. Shahechianu. And what is that again? What's that in reference to?
The I don't know.
And John, I think you got this one. This one coming to us again from David Porges.
Oh, just
690 shekels. He says, Dikayamanu vehigianu lazman haze amen.
All right.
I hope I didn't say anything wrong. Thank you. Let's go to Davidian Altar, who says, Mazel Tov to MJF. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Mazel Tov MJF. Yes. Matt Hahn, finally, $5, says, what about Takeshita with the Elite? That would make sense too.
Yeah, you could certainly.
He would be the guy that would benefit, you know, from being attached to the Elite. Absolutely.
Yeah, but we're looking for numbers on the other side as well. Like that's the side that needs the numbers. But yeah, Takeshita makes all the sense in the world to be aligned with the Elite. But
well, they can pick up a tag team somewhere, you know, the BCC. Who fits in with the BCC as a tag team?
I'd have to give it some thought. You could certainly like an FTR, but
no, but heels, violent heels. Oops,
I'm still here.
Sorry. There we go. Okay, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat room, everybody.
Let's go to Bruce, who starts us off. This is a fun show with a main event perfectly built for the live crowd. All of the work that went into building the Page Elite history pays off whenever it's returned to. I'm really enjoying the firm heel turn for BCC, and it was great to see Vancouver's own Nicole Matthews on TV, if only for a few seconds. The decision to begin with a lengthy promo segment signaled that the rhythm of this Dynamite was going to be a bit different. I'm not sure that all of the four pillars jabs landed, but I think a stronger focus on the homegrown talent is the right move coming out of the shuffling of the deck at Revolution. AEW's yet to have had a pay-per-view headlined by two distinctly homegrown stars. Do you think having MJF defend the title in the Double or Nothing main event against any one of the three pillars could be justified at this point? There you have it. I really got the sense of like teasing towards a four-way match. But if you were going to isolate it to one, yeah, I don't know if one is significantly stronger than any of the others. I guess you would lean Darby, but
I personally feel Darby is, because I thought their first match was so good. At least their first pay-per-view match was so good, and I think Darby is the most like advanced at this point of all of them. Four ways, just like because yeah, it's specially themed because of the four pillars here. I just kind of feel like it kind of waters things down ultimately, but they could do that. Thank you so much, Bruce, for that. Let's go up next to Muggin, who says the Trios three-way was strong and it was elevated by Omega and Jericho. It had been a few years since they've shared a ring. Last time was Double or Nothing 2019, and it felt fresh as Winnipeg went bananas. It was cool to see Taya Valkyrie make her debut and potentially be the one in Jade's record. I'm praying to God that Statlander is the end game for her. And the four-pillar segment was solid. I'm glad the House of Black retained, and the ending with Hangman and the Elite crossing paths for the first time in months felt intriguing. Would it be a step back character-wise to reunite with them after what they've put him through?
No, it's been like that's been the overarching story essentially of the Elite, was always like the idea of the reunion at some point. The idea would be, to me, it's
and
like,
I think we're already past that point with the story. Like Hangman's already had like positive interactions with the rest of the Elite. Like they've seemingly just made up. They just decided not to team together again. So I think we're past that, And if we can accept Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens teaming up again, I think we can accept Hangman Page, teaming up with the rest of the Elite.
All right, let us continue here with Jesse from the 6th. That was the greatest spectacle Winnipeg has seen since Timo Solani scored 76 goals in his rookie year. A really fun show. My highlight was Ted Irvine singing along to his son's song in the front row. And they got me with the Elite Hangman setup at the end. I'm very intrigued to see where this goes. Do you know where Hikaru Shida is? She'd be a natural to fit in with the Outcasts Originals role. She is in Japan as we speak. She's been wrestling there recently, as recently as
she's doing her zombie show as well.
Yeah, so I don't know how long she's in Japan for, but that's what's going on. She is wrestling.
All right, we got a Jay from Colorado who says, from top to bottom, I was pretty happy with how this show leveled up. That main event especially was something special, and I'm excited to see the direction the Trios division is taking. Here's something I never thought I'd say. I'm really enjoying this Jeff Jarrett run. Like when he came back, I had zero interest in seeing him on my TV, but he looks great and can put on a compelling match. Finally, I really like QT Marshall, but this QTV thing already feels like a dud. I get that it's supposed to mimic the TMZ style format, but that show peaked like 15 years ago. Hopefully there's more to this.
Jomo writes, they've really got to work something out with Stu. This guy's too good not to be on TV regularly. The first move he hits is a slingshot apron DDT, and he somehow gets more wild as time goes on till he got beat down at the commercial break. I know it's easy to say that they have a roster full of TV-ready people not being used, but with a still nascent trios division and a struggling tag division, there's a place for Dark Order, and there's a place for Stu Grayson. The trios wrestling rules, and that's without going in depth on a bonkers main event that makes me want to see both an Elite reunion and a Jericho-Omega team-up. For any of AEW's faults, New Japan, WWE, nor Impact offer these weekly trios matches that are almost always the highlights of Dynamite. Yeah, it's been really... I mean, the results have been fantastic so far. Like maybe at the expense of the tag team division star power, but I mean, you can't complain about the quality of these matches. They've really made a multi-man title feel special. So yeah, I totally agree. Let's go to Sal from California, who says, I really enjoyed the show as a whole tonight. Hangman being rescued by the Elite was a great cliffhanger. I wonder if we'll get Elite versus the BCC in Blood and Guts. The QTV segment didn't land with me, and I wish Hobbs wasn't a part of that group. That's my lone complaint on an otherwise great show. Yeah, similar thoughts. Coleman was at the show tonight in Winnipeg. He says, first, the main event was the loudest wrestling match I've ever been to. Second, Jeff Jarrett is going way too hard for someone of his age.
Oh, interesting. Loudest until the main event, or until the finish, I guess. Kate from Montreal says, I really enjoyed almost everything about the show tonight. Moving to a 4 pillars match for the title was something I didn't see coming, but it's a refreshing change of pace since I think the triple threat with Kenny, Pac, and Cassidy is the only time the world title has been defended in a multi-man match up until this point. I thought all 3 non-MJF guys did pretty well with their promos. I especially like Darby because I too find the extracurricular complaining unbearable, and because it's extremely rare that we get a live promo from him at all. I don't love having less than 2 minutes of women's wrestling on a 2-hour show, but the payoff was that we got a solid introduction for Taya and what looks like some movement towards a big multi-woman match down the road. Could that be Blood and Guts? Having House of Black retain was 100% the right direction, but they still managed to get a great moment for one of the hometown heroes in the end. I'm instantly psyched for the next storyline. And lastly, she says, re-sign Stu Grayson.
Yeah, I'd also contend, though, like you did have the segment with like the Outcasts, and I think like those to me are just as important as throwing out a wrestling match that you could have taken, Willow Nightingale versus Tony Storm and put them out there for 6 minutes. And instead you did a segment that there's multiple matches coming out of that and getting Sky Blue reintroduced there, having Willow attached with them, Rio attached with the originals. So, I mean, that segment to me, it was obviously designed to create more out of that storyline and have more principal characters on the original side. Next, we go to Jordan from the Bronx. Jeff Jarrett continues to be my guilty pleasure in wrestling right now. The International Belt was a classic Jeff Jarrett TNA title match featuring multiple refs, Fargo struts, endless run-ins, weapon teases, and other overbooked tropes that he was guilty of. This was all extremely annoying 20 years ago in TNA, but today in AEW, I can appreciate how hard he's actually working. I love that Max Caster's rap was able to get across a sincere gratitude for their success and fans. I don't hear Juice Robinson cut promos often. He sounds like angry Jack Black. The Pillars promo in the beginning and the Trios match at the end were great bookends to a fun show overall, which included 2 in-ring women's segments. Winnipeg brought it. Peace.
Angry Jack Black is a very specific but like spot on comparison, I would say. And I don't know if a wrestler does a wrestler want to sound like an angry Jack Black?
No.
Okay.
Would be what
Jack Black and the Bullet Club would be cool.
Okay.
All right, let's go to Cody from Maine, who says, really enjoyable show, top to bottom. I love the opening segment and just how important it felt, emphasized by the recap segment later on. More of that from AEW would be welcomed. I question the continuation of Hangman and Mox's feud, but it paid off in a big way tonight. I'm a sucker for on-screen drama between the elite. I'm sure you mentioned where you thought it would go, but if not, what is your best guess? Yeah, we kind of, we discussed, like, I think that they're in prime, like, target for, Blood and Guts and Stadium Stampede. Maybe they break it up this year. Maybe what they're doing with the Outcasts and the originals, that might be suitable for one of those two. We're kind of in like a faction period in the calendar right now, and on both sides, I think they're building interesting things. He says, while polarizing, I also enjoyed QTV, Jeff Jarrett's match, and the Outcast segment. Speaking about the latter, in his recap, Cena proposed towards the group needing 2 more members to even up his story at 5-on-5. Do you agree with this take that it could be the former Bellas, Nikki and Brie Garcia?
I mean, honestly, like they would fit in seamlessly in this storyline. I honestly do, and maybe I'll sound ridiculous later, but I really don't see the Bellas going to AEW.
I don't either. I for one thing, I think their wrestling days are over. Like I think
so too. Like they have a lot of other options to do outside of pro wrestling that, unless they believe that having a presence on television would be helpful for other projects. But I really just don't see that for them. Like they've been very successful outside of pro wrestling. And I think at this stage of their lives, I just don't know if wrestling, I mean, remember, like Nikki had like a really messed up neck on top of it. Like Probably
and you're
not.
talking about AEW. This is not just like, coming into WWE and like, I don't know, wrestling a match where you might be able to get away without doing a whole lot. Look at what like Saraya has been going through, like she's facing a lot of heavy criticism and she's having to contend with the expectations of an AEW style. Ruby Soho said the same thing, adjusting to an AEW style is a lot more physically demanding. I just don't see the Garcias needing to go through that path, first of all, or even wanting to go through that path. Maybe coming in as like managers in a speaking role would be like as much as I can expect, but between that and them, like basically, like I believe it when they say that they have no intentions of coming in. I think there are other options that you could use, to fill those gaps, but it'd be interesting.
So our answer is no, we do not see the Bellas evening things out.
Yeah. But hey, we could be wrong. Let's go to Brian, who says, I just attended my first live show and I couldn't have picked a better show. The reactions to Kenny and Jericho were incredible, and the crowd was really hyped for Stu Grayson as well. Big crowd tonight with a huge pop for Kenny Omega's excellent promo for the hometown crowd. I don't think we got to hear it, actually.
No, of course we didn't. No.
Yeah, so I guess that was after the show. Okay, after the show, Tony Khan came out to address the crowd, promising to come back to the city and announce the Forbidden Door show to the crowd. Excellent show overall, and will definitely be going next time they are here. The only disappointment was for my wife not being able to see Bryan Danielson.
All right. Well, I mean, you shouldn't have had that expectation. I mean, they did the angle last week with Danielson to not be there. Brian's in New Jersey and has the last word. Very fun show in front of a hot crowd, top-notch opener and main event, and a heck of a tease at the very end. Really nice seeing Stu Grayson and Taya Valkyrie get involved. My only issue with the episode was the overabundance of shooting in an otherwise good string of promos. I don't need to hear Sammy talk about being brought in as a job guy or a bump guy. The Outcast segment wasn't as egregious, but I'm not really enjoying this story of heels complaining about their pushes. I can certainly see that that argument. I'm at a point where I feel like it's definitely annoying when that stuff is brought up. I don't think it's the killer that I think that enough of the audience sees it for what it is, but I can certainly see why it is not great material to utilize.
Yeah, I thought those lines probably went a little too far in like maybe defeating my suspension of disbelief as well. But that's what AEW tends to play with its audience, Was that line maybe a bit too far? Could he have substituted those words for something else?
Just say, like, everyone thought me coming in, I would be the weak link of the inner circle, that I would be the one pulling this group down, and I was just going to be Jericho's shield while he was champion, and I would be thrown to the wolves. Like, easy way to just, and you can read between the lines that, for your audience, it's like, okay, he's saying weak link, but what he means is pretty much what he's stating here, that I am not the star power of even a Jake Hager, much less a Jericho or even Santana and Ortiz. Like, you can get all of these points across and just do it in a clever enough way that it's not just screaming, this is all bullshit and I'm booked badly.
Yeah, agreed.
Anyway, those are our thoughts. Man, we are coming up on the 2-hour mark of the show. So that is our time to bid everyone a farewell. Thanks to everybody for your feedback, especially those that were live there and gave us an authentic review of the Bar Mitzvah involving MJF. Wai and I are going to be back Thursday, postwrestlingcafe.com. It is Drive to Survive, episodes 7 and 8 from season number 5. We are going to be chatting about Yuki Tsunoda.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
Yes.
What else? What's the other episode? I forget.
Oh, I don't know. I've watched them. The second one's about Yuki.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have Chris Elliott on. Really happy to chat a bit more about F1 and maybe this upcoming race on the weekend in Saudi Arabia. And that's a whole nother topic that I'm sure we'll get into in the coming weeks as well. F1's relationship with Saudi Arabia. So tune in if you're an F1 fan. And if you're not, maybe you'll just watch the show and follow along with us. So we want to thank everybody who's been sending us great feedback to those shows.
Yes. The episodes are Hot Seat and Alpha Male. And the first episode, it's all about Sergio Perez. And he's in the hot seat at Red Bull. And Red Bull, they're like, you either perform or you get the F out. We've got options.
Oh, yeah. They do.
Will Sergio earn his seat? We're going to find out. So that's coming up Thursday. Friday night, special start time, Rewind to SmackDown, 10 p.m. Eastern time. We will not be covering Rampage because it's airing late on Friday. So we will go live at 10, chatting about SmackDown, and we'll make some extra time for phone calls. And if you want to get involved, you can do so. All Cafe members can join us live. And then Saturday is the UFC 286 post show, and Sunday, WrestleNomics Radio with Brandon, Jesse, and Chris. So that is it for us. Goodbye.